ஹாய் ஃப்ரெண்ட்ஸ், இன்றைக்கி நம்ம வாங்கரி கிரேஸ் அவங்களோட செஷன் தான் பார்க்க போகிறோம். அண்ட் இவங்க வந்து ஒரு இன்டர்நேஷ்னல் ஸ்டோரி டெல்லர். அண்ட் இவங்களுக்கு வந்து 20 years ஆஃப் எக்ஸ்பீரியன்ஸ் இருக்குது. நிறைய கண்ட்ரீஸ்க்கும் ட்ராவல் பண்ணி ஸ்டோரி செஷன்ஸ்லாம் கண்டக்ட் பண்ணியிருக்காங்க. டான்சானியா, உகாண்டா, துபாய், அப்புறம் ஸ்வீடன், இந்த மாதிரி நிறைய கண்ட்ரீஸ்க்கு ட்ராவல் பண்ணியிருக்காங்க. ஈவன் நம்ம சென்னைக்கு கூட வந்திருக்காங்க. அண்ட் இவங்க வந்து கேபிசி டிவியில் சில்ட்ரன்ஸ் ப்ரோக்ராமில் பர்ஃபார்ம் பண்ணியிருக்காங்க. அண்ட் இவங்க வந்து ஒரு ஆத்தரும் கூட. இவங்க வந்து ஸ்டோரி டெல்லிங்கை பற்றியும் அதோட இம்பார்ட்டன்ஸை பற்றியும் நமக்கு எக்ஸ்பிளைன் பண்ண போகிறாங்க. அண்ட் இவங்க எழுதின புக்ஸும் நமக்கு வந்து காட்ட போகிறாங்க. அண்ட் கம்ப்ளீட்டாக இந்த செஷன் வந்து ரொம்ப ஒரு யூஸ்ஃபுல்லான செஷனாக இருக்க போகுது. வெல்கம் டு ஜாய்ஃபுல் பேரண்டிங்.
Hi, hello and welcome all. And I'm so glad to have you here, Wangari Grace, the great storyteller and also an author. Thank you so much for accepting our request. And thank you, Anu and Divya, for joining with me. And okay, now shall we start? Ma'am, tell me your humble opinion about storytelling.
I find storytelling, I think it's the most amazing tool that the human beings ever have in their hands, because I believe that stories are a way that people connect. You know, that as human beings, our life is all about stories. And I'm always giving the example that when you leave your house in the morning and you go to work or you go to school or you go to the market, and when you come back in the evening or whatever time you come back, and whoever is in your house, whether it's your partner or your children or your neighbors, say, "Oh, so how was your day?" And you start explaining to them what happened when the few hours you've been away from each other, you're basically telling stories. So I think for me, storytelling is what makes us human beings. And if we did not have storytelling, then really we lose the aspect of being human.
Okay. And we all know that the storytelling is so powerful. And according to you, why is it so?
I think it's because as human beings, it is a way for us to connect and to know about each other. Very basically, when I come and ask, so how are you? Who are you? Where do you come from? And you tell me the story of your life, the story of where you come from, the story of what you do and why you do what you do. At the very basic level, it's a way of connecting to each other. And also, stories help us to connect the past, the present, and the future. And maybe that is why, for example, traditional stories are very important, because they help us to, when we are discussing about myths and legends and different kinds of stories, we are basically trying to get into the shoes of our ancestors, of those who came before us, to see the world the way they were seeing it. Because now we have science that is explaining all the things that we talk about, whether it's about thunder, it's about rain, it's about day and night. But traditionally, our people didn't know why this happened, so they made stories to explain why these things happen. So when we tell those kinds of stories, they connect us with our past. And now we are also getting people who are writing their own stories. We are writing books. And we're not just telling stories about what has happened. We're telling stories about what is happening now during our lifetime. And I'm sure in another 20 or 30 years, those who come after us will be telling the stories we're telling now, almost as if they are myths and legends, you know? And it is also a way for us to connect to the future and what we think the future is. What hope is there for the future? What dreams do we have for the future? And that is why all kinds of stories get told. That's why even in movies, we have science fiction. Why? Because all of us would want to talk about the past, the present, and the future, but in ways that all of us can be able to imagine. And that is also something else that storytelling for me is very important, is that it creates an imagination in our minds as storytellers and in the minds of those who are listening to the stories.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
That's great, Wangari. You were just talking about the traditional values and from now for the future of storytelling, how it is going to be. So please tell me how the storytelling is going to be for the children. Is going to be a talented one or talent based or a soft skill development? How we can, you know, frame the storytelling for future generations?
For me, I think storytelling is a skill that every human being needs to have. And it is not just for people who want to venture into storytelling or in film or in acting or in any art-based program, but it is for teachers, it is for doctors, it is for psychologists. So some of us, of course, like us here in this team, we are storytellers, so chances are that we are talented in telling stories. But I also believe that storytelling is something that people can learn. And I always believe that talent or no talent, whatever it is that you do, as long as you put effort in learning it, you can become good at it. And if you are talented, but you don't do anything about it, then you will not have any improvement. So I always advise people, everyone around me, please tell stories. Don't tell me, I'm not an artist, I'm not talented, I cannot. No, just go out there and do it. And don't ever think that storytelling or public speaking is a skill that you can only use if you're doing public speaking, but it will help you in whatever it is that you choose to do in life.
Great. So it is a completely a soft skill development. So that is what I understood. And is there any types of reaching the storytelling to the children that could be used in different various methods?
Of course, if you come to my country, there are different tellers tell stories differently. So, for example, here in Kenya, and of course, I think in most African and other cultures around the world, storytelling was usually done by older people, the grandparents. And so, I remember when I began doing storytelling, and I would tell people, I am a storyteller. And they would look at me and tell me, what do you mean you're a storyteller? You are just a teenager. What is wrong with you? Stories are told by old people. And that led to people here also picking that way of telling. Like old people, they talk very slowly, the kind of costumes they wear. Some of them even put powder on their heads to look old. But I believe that stories should be told in as different ways as we are different human beings in this world. I find that, for example, African storytellers and Asian storytellers as well are very good with telling stories with music and movement and dance. It is just the way we do it. It's not something that I have to think about it. You know, you find some people are very good in body language. So, for example, we have storytellers who are amazing at mime. They might not sing or dance, but their body adds value to the story. You might find some storytellers who are very good just in words. And I remember years ago, I went to a festival in Iran. And the women there, the way they were telling stories, they were just sitting at one place, not moving at all. But the intonation in their voice, I think because they have to be still when they're telling it, the intonation in their voice, their facial expressions have really evolved. So I think that we should tell stories in any way that we feel comfortable. I always tell young storytellers, what are you good at? Find what you're good at and incorporate that in your storytelling. That is, for me, the most important thing. About the types of stories to tell, I think tell stories as widely as possible. Well, of course, I know most of us do traditional stories, which I absolutely love. I call them wisdom stories because there is so much wisdom in traditional stories from around the world. And the good thing with traditional stories is that you don't have to lecture people. You just tell your story and anyone can pick whatever it is they want. But people are telling stories differently. I hear people saying, I tell healing stories. oh, okay, that is great. I tell stories to be able to teach academics, to teach mathematics and science. So explore as much as you can, find what works for you, and do it.
So we have wisdom stories and healing stories. How about storytelling in education? How much is it important, and how it is important?
Well, you're asking an African that. And I would say it's the basis of education. Because for us, traditionally, before we had formal education, we would teach through stories. That's how people knew about their families. People knew about different kinds of skills. So for us, me as a Kenyan, storytelling in education is like the bare minimum. Like we cannot avoid having stories in education. And as a storyteller, I also work, I think 80% of my work is with schools. And I can see how this brings a difference in the way people are teaching. So, for example, last week was World Book Day, World Book Week, and I know that sometimes I have had schools calling me and telling me, "Oh, I know we are very stuck in academics, but our children are losing imagination. Can you come and share stories with us? Because we know that storytelling is one of the ways to create imagination." Stories are a way of expanding the concentration span of children across the whole range of school. And let's also not forget that now you can actually teach different concepts through stories. You know, instead of coming there and saying, okay, so a cow makes this sound, it looks like this, why don't you come and tell a story that has the characters? If you're teaching social studies, for example, that has that. Do you want to teach mathematics? There are stories that have numbers that you can actually use either to teach the whole concept or to introduce the topic that you would like to introduce. So it is very, very important. And also, as storytellers, one of the benefits we have is that when you share stories of different topics, different themes in an academic setting, and even as a teacher, then it becomes an interesting way of teaching. Because then children realize, oh, so we're actually having fun in the stories and we're learning something. And I believe that the best way to learn is when you're having fun.
So storytelling is the base. You say it is the basic for everything. So how can we encourage this basic thing as a teacher or as a mother?
So mothers or parents, to say, are actually the first teachers. I have two girls, and I think anyone who meets them, even the teachers say, oh, especially the older one says, oh, wow, she loves reading. She loves, telling stories. She especially loves reading storybooks. And I can clearly trace this to the fact that even when she was still in my stomach, I would actually go to events with her. When she was as young as 6 months, I would go to events with her and she would listen to stories and she would see me reading stories. She would see me reading a book and I would read with her. And I think this provided a very important way of modeling without me having to tell her, no, sit down, pick a book and read. Because of course, you know that at home especially, children do what they see you doing, not what you tell them to do. So the first thing as a parent, if you are there and you are always telling your child, you should read, you should listen to stories, you should do this, please trust me that unless they see you doing it, they won't believe it is important. Because if it is so important, then why is my mother not doing this? Why is my father not doing this? So for me, my daughter, especially seeing me reading to her, reading with her, got her interested in stories, in listening to stories, in telling stories, and in reading. And now I can also see a difference because she can now read for herself. So sometimes she just says, okay, can I read for you? And I will sit there and listen to her reading to me. And she is now actually reading to her younger sister. I mean, that is actually, I think, the best way that you can also teach a lot of things. And both in school and at home, it's also a good way of introducing new concepts. So, for example, sometimes I hear her talking about volcano and lava, and I'm like, I don't think you've learned that in school yet. And I have definitely not taught you that. Where did you learn about that? And she'll tell me, no, but in that book that you bought me, it has this. And she'll talk about different kinds of fish, and she'll say, oh, the book you brought me about the shark had this kind of fish. So it's also a way of expanding their world. And let's not talk about vocabulary, because we use very few words when we speak. Even at home, there are words that you are using over and over and over again. But then when they are reading in a book, they encounter many more words than we use to speak. And that way it expands their vocabulary. And this also helps them in academics. And also, it also helps them in expressing themselves. So in social skills, this also comes in very, very handy. And also, when you're using stories and storytelling and books, it's also a way of discussing difficult topics. Because maybe there's some topics you're not very comfortable discussing with like, how do you start discussing this with your child? And one of the ways I've found is, why don't you get a storybook that has that topic as part of the story that is being told? And then once the child has read the book, then it is easy for you to discuss, because you say, oh, remember that character in this book was facing this and this and this. Aha, what do you think about it? Have you ever faced these kinds of things? And that way you can address issues ranging from self-identity and self-confidence, and even issues around bullying, because sometimes your child might not be able to tell you what they're going through. Maybe they're afraid, whether of teachers or of other parents, or they don't have the words for it. But books always serve as an opener to whatever you'd like to discuss.
Great. So you were just talking about your daughter. So please tell us when you started, and this will be a great information for all the mothers, those who watch our video. So when to start reading a story book or tell a story to the children?
I began reading to her when she was in my stomach. I think I was lucky because I was already a storyteller and I had heard the power of stories. So, and I think in a way, even when I would go to events, I remember there was one event that I went and I was 6 months pregnant and we were singing and dancing. And I remember one woman coming and telling me, hey, stop jumping up so much, your baby in the stomach. And I said, no, I know she's actually very fine. Because you could even see that sometimes when I was at an event, it's like she just stirring in the stomach, like she actually feels the excitement as well. And by the way, this also really helped her in speaking, being in places where she can actually hear stories, talk, read with her, because she began speaking fluently when she was quite young. I remember when she was around 2 years and neighbors were asking me, so why do you still have this child at home? She's speaking, she should be in school. And I was telling them, no, she's still too young to go to school. And I attribute this also, the speech, to storytelling. So please start reading to your children when they're still in your stomach. Trust me, they can hear you. And they also learn to recognize your voice. So as a mother, that's a plus to you.
Great, thank you.
So we spoke about different styles the storytellers use, like some may be very good in words, some may be very good in mind. So do we really need any puppets or objects while telling stories? Is it necessary?
Well, personally, I don't really use a lot of props. That is me as a person. But I know other tellers who do very well using things like hand puppets or even puppets themselves. I believe that whether you use a prop, a puppet, or a toy or anything, it is not about you using it, it is how well you use it. So if I are using a puppet, does it add value to the story you are telling? Does it increase your interaction with the audience? Does it increase their comprehension, their understanding? If it does that, go ahead and use it. But if you are using a puppet, but it's not adding value to the story you're telling, then you don't have to use it. Puppets especially work very well with younger children, maybe whose concentration is very little, or the people who are slow to understand. And I have seen people who use them in amazing ways. So for example, I think I've seen people like a storyteller from Singapore called Roger Jenkins, and Roger uses puppetry very, very well. And I love how he does it, but I don't think that is my strength. I think if I also try to use that, because I'm also very physical, then I would have to reduce some of my physicality to be able to do that. So if you feel that you using the prop or the puppet adds value to the way you're telling the story and to the story itself and to how you are interacting with the audience, go ahead and use it. But if you're using the puppet or the prop so that you can be lazy enough not to work on your story, then you need to go back to the drawing board.
Yeah, that was nice. Stories are really a bonding time between parents and kids, right? And kindly speak about the books you wrote, ma'am.
So I have a number of books, a lot of books now. So I'll show you a few of the books that I have. So this is one of the books that I love. It's called The Precious Bracelet. And this particular book, what I love about it is that it's also, even the way it's written, it's a story you can actually read out loudly, because it tells a story about a woman who is explaining about her great-grandparents, her grandparents, and her parents, but using a bracelet. So this is one of the books that I have done. I have done quite a number of books. This is another one. And this I love because it also incorporates a folktale. I believe all of you know the story about the elephant and the blind man. So that's one of the stories that I use here, that the character here uses to try and explain to the other children that, you know what, you might not know everything. Someone might be right, and someone else might still be right, and yet you have different opinions. So I have quite a number of books that I have written, and my books are also in 2 different languages. So here in Kenya, we speak English and Kiswahili as our official languages. So I have quite a number of books. Let me show you one of actually the earliest book I ever wrote. And I love it because it's also a folktale that I tell sometimes. This was my very first book. And maybe, just maybe, I'm not sure, maybe you had me tell this story about the forever tree. And it tries to explain why do we have different types of fruits growing in different places and, you know, in different trees. So I have quite a number of books. And for me, books are an addition to my performance storytelling, because I say that I cannot be everywhere, but my books can reach where I cannot reach. So that's one of the things that I also love about writing. That's why I write. And sometimes parents tell me, but I don't know any stories. I would like to tell stories to my children, but I don't know any stories. So saying, okay, here is a book. Why don't you go and get this book and read it with your children? It's also a plus. And also, when I write books, I try to write in a way that it would be very easy for the parent or the teacher to read out loudly to their child, because I know that spoken language and written language is sometimes very different. So I always try to write in a way that, you know, the person reading it can actually read it out loudly, has some avenues where they can put in some music or ask questions to the child or sing with them, so that to make it as interactive as possible. And so, of course, as parents, I have a challenge for you. Please make reading fun, not work. Because most of the time, you're reading it in such a boring way that even your child is thinking, this really, I don't think I want to do this. But if you read it in a very interesting way, change your voice with the different characters, If a story is a story that you can actually relate with, and you think you have a song that you remember even from your childhood, or you had somewhere and it can fit somewhere inside there, please do that. If you think that changing some of the characters in the story would make your child understand it even better or interact better with it, please go ahead and don't feel guilty. The idea is to make the child love reading, and in that way, you don't have to convince them that reading is important. You just need to tell them reading is fun and show them that it actually is fun. And then now, the problem you will have is that you will have to give a good chunk of your budget to buying books, because your child will always be asking for them.
That was really
Can we
nice.
purchase your books, Wangari? Can we?
Sorry?
Where can we purchase your books? Is it available online, Amazon, Flipkart, something like that?
For now, unfortunately, the books are not available online. And I also realized that, well, my publishers are online and you can order the books. The issue becomes now in terms of shipping. So yes, but I'm discussing with a few friends of mine, especially in the storytelling world, and I even had this conversation with Jiva about, just maybe we could be able to, if I'm going to an event, I can carry a good number of my books and leave them there. And if there are any tellers or parents from the region who would like the books, then they can find a way to get them there. Yes, but I'm really hoping that my publishers are listening to that question, and they will do something about it to make sure that the books are available online at affordable rates.
Oh, that's great. Please let us know. We would like to have a copy of it.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. And one last question, so interesting one. What is the reason behind you choosing a storytelling profession?
I did not choose to tell stories. I think stories chose me. because my background is theater. So I've done a lot of acting on stage, acting on television here, a bit of films, but I never planned to have a career in theater or in the arts. I was just doing it before I go to college and get a real job. But then I realized that I was actually really enjoying it, and I was also good at it. So I kept telling stories, and I think I made the right choice because I absolutely enjoy what I do. I think for me, storytelling is one thing that if you wake me up at midnight and tell me, hey, Wangari, there's an event that wants you to tell a story, I won't have trouble waking up. I love storytelling because I can use a story and tell it to children. I can tell the same story to adults, to older people, and the performance will be completely different. I love stories because I can teach without pointing fingers at people, and saying, you're the bad one. No, I'll just come and tell my story, and you can take whatever it is you want from the story. And I also love stories because most of the time when I'm doing my events, it does not feel like work. It's actually fun just interacting with different audiences. And I love that now as a storyteller and as a writer, I have opportunities to travel around and to share the love of what I like doing. And I don't think there are many professions that allow you to actually enjoy what you're doing. And I think that's what makes storytelling for me a special career.
And that was nice. Choosing a profession which loves really great. And that was a wonderful session. Thank you so much. And learning from you is really a true blessing for beginners like me. And hope this session will be very useful for all parents and teachers. And thank you so much once again for accepting our request in your busy schedule.
You're very welcome, and thank you guys for inviting me. I hope to see you, Swati, and the others also in many years from now still telling stories and infecting the same love of stories to even younger people, so that when we are over, we will still have storytellers continuing with this amazing job that we are doing.